Okay, hi everyone.
So let me do smart attendance. Pull that up right now for.
Smart attendance, and we'll go to our debate.
So Micah can get ready for whatever she needs, because we need to do that, and I need to shut down the computer to record this file.
So that means we have to finish, by
20 minutes before the end of class. So that means I gotta. So go to Cyber Campus,
and then we log in.
log in, and go to here.
Okay, so let's go to why isn't it English? It's supposed to be English. Okay, there it is. Okay, then we go to attendance, and your smart attendance number is
588. 588 is your smart attendance number. So we'll go to 588, chatting 588. 588.
okay. So there's your smart attendance number, and let's now go to the debate, because like I said, we need to give enough time for that, and with the more elaborate procedures for voting, because I want you to really think about how to prepare your own debates. So and so just remind myself who I am and who Micah is. And I think I'm pro. Yes, I am pro. So to South Koreans and democracy, the news media is the marketplace of ideas. And so let me open up the pro opening statement. And so I am pro, and you can see it there. I think you can see it. Make sure I'm sharing the screen, and go here to share screen.
See it. So then let me set the timer. And my time is for 6 minutes maximum opening statement. So let me see. Set the alarm clock, and for timer. Timer 06, and I will start now. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, the media is a marketplace in a democracy. The news media still remains the marketplace of ideas, even more so with social media, because that's the subtext of this argument, right? That we had in the past the media system that was dominated by gatekeepers. I mean, when I was a small child, not too long ago, there were different forms of media, but they were controlled by corporations, typically big corporations. So like there were only three networks, for example. So if you wanted to get broadcast news, you had to watch one of three national networks in the United States. And this was the case until 1980 when CNN started. But and of course there were editors, there were bosses that controlled what was posted and broadcast every night on the media. And if something was total garbage, it would be blocked. But it still was a subjective decision, a subjective choice by those editors, what they considered to be acceptable and what they considered not to be acceptable. And so what we have now, 42 years later, with social media, Facebook, Twitter, and of course all these other more recent formats that you might use, like TikTok and others, is that everybody can post whatever they want on the media about anything, about the color of the moon, about Barack Obama, about Donald Trump, about Joe Biden, about the US Senate, about anything. Anything that they want. And so now, as a result of social media, of course, the ideas that we can consume, that we can select from, it's become infinitely larger. And that's a good thing, right? Isn't that a good thing? Why should I listen to some gatekeeper who was controlling television news reporting back during the Vietnam War? Or newspaper editors, when newspapers were controlled by editors, when newspaper reporting was controlled by editors. And they lied to us back then. They lied to us about the Vietnam War. They lied to us about about supposed communists undermining American society as a result of people like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King protesting against racial oppression in the United States. Was America better back in the 1950s and 60s when there wasn't social media, when there were only 3 television networks, when the 3 networks also controlled the radio broadcasting system in the United States? American Broadcasting Company, Columbia Broadcasting System, and National Broadcasting Company, NBC, ABC, CBS. We still got into disastrous wars that were a mistake, like the Vietnam War. That was a horrible mistake. Is the world necessarily, was it better back when old white men, old conservative white men controlled what was permitted to be broadcast as news on the radio and television? I think now today we have an infinite variety of sources of ideas. And you know, it's okay for us to have this right to choose and select. Because you know, in today's world, you will pay the price if you select wrongly. And that's okay. That's called, you know what we call that? We call that personal responsibility. So if you want to believe stupid stuff about coronavirus and COVID-19, that ivermectin, that horse dewormer, is somehow a cure for corona COVID-19, okay, go ahead and do that. And if you get sick and die, it's your fault. And let's accept that the fundamental foundation of liberal democracy is this notion that you and I, as individual citizens, have a fundamental level of self-responsibility to fulfill. We have to choose what we want to read and study. We have to choose to keep our minds open, rather than like 50 years ago when you had just 3 television networks and controlling television and radio, by the way, and also newspapers all towing the same line. And I'm supposed to accept that because it's quote unquote private enterprise and free press, when of course still there's really no such thing as a free corporate press. Corporate media is still dominated by the needs of corporations to make money. It's always been that way. And back then, you didn't want to make an enemy of the U.S. government if you were a corporation, because you needed access to U.S. My clock stopped. To U.S. Individuals in the government to tell us what is going on and give me information as a journalist so that I can meet my deadline at 5 o'clock, write my article with juicy information that the U.S. defense minister or defense secretary or general gave me. This is a freer world today, and it's a better world as a result of it, because indeed now, genuinely, we have an infinite marketplace of ideas. Thank you. Micah. Oh, anybody have any questions? If nobody wants to ask questions, you can, not right now, you can ask later. And of course, so let us now call upon you to vote on opening statement, pro-opening statement. That's me. To South Koreans, in democracy, the news media is the marketplace of ideas. So I guess it didn't stop. Huh, that's interesting. So, okay, Micah. Yes. The what? The smart attendance? I posted it on the face. Does it not appear on the chat? Okay, just a second. So, so Micah, do you want to come up here and speak in front of, it's 588. Micah, you want to come up here and speak? Okay, because presentation style is part of this. So, okay, Micah, so here you go.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Let me introduce you to the concept of what a marketplace of ideas is, once again, because my opponents did not. So it refers to the ideas that in a society, different beliefs can compete freely with one another in an open and transparent public discourse, instead of being, for example, censored by the government or some part of society. So the idea supports freedom of expression, and it connects back to the First Amendment. just like in a marketplace, ideas and information can compete against each other, and consumers, so us, will make the choices on which one they believe is to be truthful. So as everyone knows, most people receive their news from the internet nowadays, as also my opponent has pointed out, because news media outlets have adapted to the current digital age. So it's not just, as stated before, it's not just 3 news channels like we had before. There's tons of websites, there's tons of platforms where masses of information are being exchanged now. So information, opinions, and ideas now all compete against each other on the internet, as I said. And so the traditional notion of what a marketplace of idea was, the initial idea, it has transformed to what now takes place on the internet. However, this is being my main point today, our behavior on the internet, which is continuously monitored and processed through analysis of big data. So you have complex algorithms that categorize our choices and personalize our online environment, which is used to provide, amongst other things, said news and information that I have mentioned. So what we see is that, so what we see and what information we get is being influenced heavily by algorithms that exist out there on website and platforms against our will. So the traditional, as I said, the traditional notion of a marketplace is increasingly vanishing in the current digital age. And especially as people in like our younger generation, me, Juliette, and everyone else in this class, consume their information and share their opinions online. So particularly on social media platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and TikTok. I personally don't have TikTok, but those are the current marketplaces of ideas that exist now. And on such platforms, the information infrastructure is privatized because they're social platforms, they belong to people. And they don't necessarily answer to truth or democracy or supply and demand, but instead they go by their own rules. There are rules to using Twitter, there are rules to using Facebook, and there are rules to using Instagram. And also regulations and narratives that provide companies, for example, with advertising possibilities. So it's not as freely as we think it is, and it's not as transparent and as liberal as we would hope it would be. So essentially comes down to private companies that, to a vast extent, singularly decide what type of information products are available on the marketplace. It is what used to be a public space, which was supposed to be the marketplace of ideas. The idea was to be for it to be a public space that is being capitalized by private enterprises. So no, I don't think that we have a marketplace of ideas anymore, or that the current news media as we have it now, being composed of primarily social media and websites that show ads that are victims to algorithms and data analysis. I wouldn't say it is a free or transparent marketplace of idea where these ideas can be exchanged freely.
Okay, questions? Questions to Khan? You can ask now. Khan will speak once more, but now it's my turn to rebut. Okay. First off, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, that's what I'm saying. There is now an infinite number of sources of ideas, of peddlers, of marketers of ideas. What is a market? A place where you go to get something from somebody else. And thanks to Twitter and TikTok and Facebook, we have an infinite source of ideas to go to. Why is my esteemed opponent so afraid of freedom? Why is Khan so afraid that people now have an infinite number of ideas to access? What's so terrifying about that? Oh my gosh, you mean the world was better 60 years ago when old white American men in their corporate boardrooms of media companies told me what to think? Oh yes, please tell me how to think about the Gulf of Tonkin and that fake attack that Lyndon Johnson claimed North Vietnam perpetrated against the American Navy to justify America's attack into Vietnam. Oh yes, tell me what to think. Why are we so afraid of the ability of people to access an infinite number of points of view? And we all know about Facebook and algorithms. We all know that Facebook likes to show us things that reflect what we already look at. And First off, I spend all of my time on the computer all day, every day, from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep, 7 days a week. And Facebook doesn't do that much. I'm not controlled by these algorithms that are brainwashing me. And sometimes when they do send me or suggest things to look at, I can accept them or decline them. I accept them if I want to accept them. I accept them because I would be the type of person that is not so concerned about free thought and freedom of information. I'm the kind of person that simply wants to, I got to set my timer here, that wants to be confirmed as to who I am without having to think. And there are lots of people like that. I mean, that's just, and I'm not going to judge them. I might not like that. I might not accept that. But first off, those people are not going to go away. What's the alternative, I asked to Khan. You want the government to take over Facebook and Twitter, to censor the social media for you? I mean, what is the solution? What's the alternative that Khan is proposing? Elon Musk knows this. This is why Elon Musk is going to, when he takes over Twitter, he's going to make it open to everybody again, because somebody's got to make the judgment that, oh, what Donald Trump is saying is wrong. How dare they? 70 million people voted for Donald Trump. They know what Donald Trump is like. Oh, but we have to protect ourselves from those troglodytes. That's the implied argument in Khan's statement, that basically that people are troglodytes. There are too many troglodytes in the world, and we can't let them have an infinite access to infinite amounts of ideas, however ridiculous they are, because they'll go crazy. Ah! Well, then what's the other alternative? China will tell you what the alternative. The People's Republic of China, they've got an alternative model. Yes, we do control the internet. Yes, we do censor it. That's the alternative. With their secret police and their control over society and their arrest of people that say what the authorities do not want them to say. So I call upon you, ladies and gentlemen, to support the notion that, in fact, with social media, the marketplace of ideas has expanded infinitely. And we have to find, if there are problems with our politics over this, we have to find other ways to deal with it. Like, for example, let's teach our children from the time they start going to school about information literacy. I do that every morning. When I come in here and to show things that are reported in class, I go and check the source. We have to teach people to check the source. And, you know, let's face it, a lot of people are going to social media for ideas, not for ideas, but for entertainment. They want to feel outrage. Oh my gosh! I mean, how many people really believe the QAnon conspiracy that the Democrats, led by Hillary Clinton and George Soros, are running a child worldwide sex trafficking ring, a pedophile ring, where they're not only trafficking in children for sex, but eating them, cannibals? I mean, they don't believe that, but they want to engage in that because it's like a role-playing game, like Dungeons and Dragons, except on Facebook. That's all it is. Oh, you have sick individuals who go nuts over that. Yeah, but those people are always around. And that's an issue of gun control, not censorship. That's an issue of gun control. How do you keep guns out of their hands, like AR-15s? And, you know, I finally have to say that, you know, I would like Khan to reconsider wearing a mask, because I'm a little bit concerned about the coronavirus. And I have to say that I mean, I think that I'm the one that's more conscious of the well-being of the other people in this room. So I think you should vote for me. Give me some benefit for the fact that I have a stronger sense of social welfare. Ah! Presentation style. You like me? Like me. Like me. Like me. Okay.
Okay, sorry for not wearing a mask. I promise I wear it all the time. Okay, so why am I afraid of all that information being so freely accessible? Because, well, my opponent may be right in the notion that people can make use of their freedom of speech and go on the internet and post their thoughts on particular topics. They're not being censorized in what they think, at least in democratic countries. However, those very people that share their opinions online are the same people that are accountable for a massive amount of misinformation and disinformation that is circulating out there on the internet. So, going back to the 2020 elections, an unprecedented amount of content was circulating during the 2020 election campaign that was misleading or simply untrue, as voters had to navigate through all the confusing media environment where the distinctions between legitimate news sites and imposters in social media become highly unclear. So at a time where you have to make a very educated decision, a very thought through decision of who you're going to vote for, you can't even go on the internet and maybe inform yourself about who you're going to vote for, because the masses of amounts of information that is going on there, and you sometimes when you have simple tweets, it's not super easy to fact check those. So, and these audiences were spread across sources and platforms based on the party they identify with, the ideology and the candidate they prefer. So you would have sites where there's a lot of right-wing voters, you would have sites where there's a lot of left-wing voters, and they kind of just, they stipulate each other to absolute heights and absolute maximums, and tell each other that they're being right, and everyone is so sure of what they're thinking that kind of the line between what's true and what's not true is blurred. So as a consequence, you have isolated within these media echo chambers misinformation and explosive rhetoric and political discussions online that lead to escalated tensions and wider the rifts between political groups. As you can see in the US, the rift between left Democratic and Republican is huge. So the fact that posts of social media users, furthermore, including Trump, had to be taken down or had fact-checking labels applied to them during the election campaign by Twitter and Facebook, and also the fact that Trump and some of his allies were banned from Twitter, highlights that social media platforms frequently used as information distributors march by their own drum and play by their own rule book of what is allowed and what is not allowed on their websites, hence performing some sort of censorship, essentially, on their websites. And I'm not saying that taking down those tweets of Trump or banning him from Twitter was wrong, but it definitely goes against the notion that there's absolutely no censorship out there in the marketplace of ideas, because there clearly is to some degree. And also in our book, Johnson mentions that in the run-up to the presidential contest, wealthy conservatives, for example, set up fake local news websites across the country to push out stories that would damage Democratic candidates. So due to this, more than 1,800 local newspapers have closed since 2004. This goes to show that ideas cannot freely compete against each other out there, and that there's also resources involved to be able to keep up in the competition. So, to conclude my point, no, I don't think that the news media is a marketplace of ideas, at least not nowadays. It might have been back in the day where information was mainly shared in physical newspapers or on the 3 TV channels that existed back then. However, in the current digital age, the notion of the marketplace of ideas has changed. Its location has changed its location and switched to now be primarily present on the internet via newspaper agency websites and social media platforms. So, as such, these new locations for the alleged free and transparent and open exchange of ideas is now the internet that is poisoned with algorithms and monitoring of our choices as consumers for the sake of data collection, which then in turn feeds back to us that particular kind of information that the algorithms thinks we would like to see and that we would like to see. So if I go on right-wing websites, this is all I'm going to get back. And essentially, I will not get any other information and will only receive that kind of information, so I will vote for people like Trump, which is a huge problem. So Another problem with these ideas is that the information structure, as I mentioned previously, is privatized, and social platforms do not necessarily answer to the truth and to truth and democracy, supply and demand, but instead do it according to their own rules and regulations and narratives, which not rarely also includes deleting of tweets or of whole user accounts. So also to answer Pro's question, no, I don't currently have an alternative to the problem, but we shouldn't think in extremes, either full transparency or complete censorship like in China. All I'm saying is that the news media is nothing more than what once was a public space to express ideas and is now capitalized by private enterprises. And it is in our hands to try our best to check information, because nobody is going to do that for you. But be aware that there will never be 100% transparency because of the way that the current news media and the marketplace of idea functions right now. Thank you.
Set my timer for 3 minutes. And of course, if you're going to ask a question to Pro or Con, your time is coming up here. Opportunity, I should say. Okay, given what Pro has just stated, why is Con so unwilling to accept that this marketplace of ideas involves competition? I mean, that was a theme in the book, right? In the chapter for this week regarding the role of social media. Yeah, we had these dirty tricks by campaigns coming up with fake news, and I think it was primarily Republican, Donald Trump, pro-Trump Republican Party. But of course, they were in competition with other Democratic Party candidates running for office around the United States, including for president and hundreds and thousands of other offices. And that's the notion of a marketplace. Competition for ideas. And that means you can have disinformation, you can have people that spread propaganda, but there's competitors with them that are looking for that propaganda and respond to it. And again, I come back to that fundamental notion that still in a liberal democracy, I as a citizen have a responsibility I am responsible for my own education. I am responsible for my own fact checking. I am responsible for, think about it. We send, even at the most basic level of education in the United States, from the age of 5 years old until the age of 18, for 13 years, children have to go to school at a minimum, unless they drop out, unfortunately, due to problem. From age 5, kindergarten, even earlier, preschool, 4 years old, even earlier, daycare, if the mother's working, right? And they go to school until they're 18. How many years of education and training are we supposed to give to people before we allow them and expect them to take responsibility for information literacy? 13 years of public education. And then they can go to college and get another 4 or 5 years and onward. And keep that in mind. Again, to repeat that point earlier, that these information sources are competing with each other. And finally, I want to reiterate that main point I made earlier. You can't necessarily trust the mainstream media. The New York Times, for example, they're of course very concerned about making sure that they compete in this for-profit media business, this prestigious New York Times, in making sure that they don't alienate their core readership. And in New York City has a very strong pro-Israel population living within it. And so the New York Times repeats misstatements, misstatements about the establishment of Israel. I just read, I can show it to you if you want to see it next class. A report just a week or two ago, repeating the lie repeating the lie that the Arab rulers appealed to the Arab people in Palestine to leave in 1948 when Israel was being established. That it wasn't that the Jews expelled, the Zionists expelled the Arabs in ethnic cleansing. No, no, no. The Arab leaders called upon them to leave so that they get out of the way in response to the Arab attack against the new state of Israel. And that's a lie. There's no evidence for that. There's no evidence that Arab leaders called upon the Palestinians to leave Palestine in 1948. But they keep repeating this. Even the mighty New York Times. I remember the journalist who wrote this, Kingsley. Elizabeth Kirshner is also New York Times reporter in Israel. Her son served in the Israeli army. So where is the truth? Where is the truth? Okay, so anybody have any kind of extra credit question they want to ask, pro or con? If not, then I will ask you to vote on who won the debate. So pro or con, and of course you have until 10 o'clock to decide that if you need a minute or two to decide. Of course, Micah should vote as well. And then also to grade the debate. Grade the debate. And so grade the debate here, you can see. And as to how you would grade the debate. And so now what I have to do, I think, is to shut down this computer so that I can open up my laptop. And it's a nice little break to do that so that we can shift over to discussing the notes a little bit more that Micah referenced. So I'll do that now and open up my laptop. So 1 minute.